Former Pentagon official says government is hiding the existence of aliens from the public. Former Pentagon official Luis Elizondo resigned last year after discovering the government were hiding evidence of aliens from the public. In a letter to Defense Secretary James Mattis, Elizondo asked, "Why aren't we spending more time and effort on this issue?" Newsweek reports, in the private sector, Elizondo soon found an unlikely ally in his quest for the truth. Tom DeLonge, the former frontman for the pop-punk band Blink-182, the group behind the song called Aliens Exist. Turns out DeLonge actually believed it. In 2017, he launched To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, and Elizondo quickly became its public face. The mission? To advance UFO research, produce science fiction-themed entertainment about UFOs, and with luck, glean some insight into the super-advanced technology displayed by UFOs, such as spaceships that can seemingly defy gravity, that the Pentagon keeps ignoring. The Academy claims to have attracted more than 2,000 investors and raised roughly $2.5 million, and Elizondo found a mostly enthusiastic crowd in Cherry Hill. Quote, "Sometimes people people may have associated you with being fringe, being out there," end quote. He told the MUFON audience over a buffet dinner. Quote, "All along, you were right," end quote. Not everyone was convinced. Some cited a lack of evidence in his presentation. Tyndall was suspicious of the Pentagon connection. Quote, "It could be a cover for something else," end quote. That's what she said. But if Elizondo is trying to lend credibility to research on unexplained sightings, why would he partner with a guy whose band had a hit album titled Enema of the State? Enema of the State. And why would he choose as a venue a UFO conference teeming with conspiracy theorists? Quote, "We have to start somewhere. I don't get invited to Stanford or MIT," end quote. That's what he told Newsweek that day. Super Hornets and Tic Tacs. Each year, thousands of people report UFO sightings to various authorities, the police, the Pentagon, radio talk show hosts. By one account, more than 100,000 sightings may have been reported since 1905. Nearly all can be explained away as clouds, meteors, birds, weather balloons, or some other quotidian phenomenon. Efforts at rational debunking serve only to harden the conviction of the true believers, who are convinced that abundant evidence of alien visitations is hidden in secret military documents, literal X-Files, locked away in the bowels of the so-called deep state. The X-Files conspiracy theory is the beating heart of the UFO community, an article of faith among enthusiasts and the basis of almost every call to action on social media, #disclosure. It's also encouraged by some prominent people, including John Podesta, who lamented on Twitter a few years ago that he failed to secure the #disclosure of the UFO files, despite being President Bill Clinton's chief of staff. When Elizondo went public, it gave a sheen of credibility to the conspiracy crowd. His background is typical of a straight-arrow military officer with a distinguished career. He's the son of a Cuban exile who participated in the Bay of Pigs, the failed CIA-sponsored plot to overthrow Fidel Castro in 1961. Elizondo worked as a bouncer while attending the University of Miami. After graduating in 1995, he joined the Army and trained to be a military spy. Later at the Pentagon, Elizondo showed no sign of being a disgruntled deployee or a loon, spending much of his career in the shadows, chasing militants in South America and the Middle East. In 2010, he started to run a small group charged with investigating reports of unexplained aerial phenomena, a less controversial term for UFOs. It was an obscure, low-budget initiative created 3 years before at the behest of then Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. Details are murky, but the $22 million program seemed to have been operated jointly by Elizondo and Bigelow Aerospace, a Nevada-based defense contractor whose billionaire owner, Robert Bigelow, is an avid believer in UFOs. 2 months before the Times published its front-page story, Elizondo retired from the Pentagon. He shows Newsweek what he says is a copy of his resignation letter dated October 4th, 2017, and addressed to Mattis. The letter expresses some frustration about the lack of attention his program was getting, and it suggests that something he learned at the Pentagon turned him into a true believer. Quote, despite overwhelming evidence at both the classified and unclassified levels, certain individuals in the department remain staunchly opposed to further research on what could be a tactical threat to our pilots, sailors, and soldiers, and perhaps even an existential threat to our own national security, end quote. That's what he wrote. Now, what was Elizondo referring to? He is cagey, but describes one piece of evidence, an audio and video clip from 2004 that sounds like the kind of potential threat noted in his resignation letter. The clip was leaked to the Times. Elizondo insisted it was not him, and has since become a staple of UFO lore. On a routine training mission off the coast of San Diego, 2 FA-18F Super Hornets were instructed to investigate what a confidential report later characterized as multiple anomalous aerial vehicles. Multiple anomalous aerial vehicles. The pilots reported that these vehicles, quote-unquote, descended from approximately 60,000 feet down to 50 feet in the blink of an eye. One of the pilots reported that the vehicles looked like white Tic Tacs. Elizondo is not the only high-powered military talent at the Academy venture. Chris Mellon, who served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence during the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, has also signed on. In his former job, he had oversight of the Pentagon's super-secret special access programs, among the most highly classified, compartmented black operations. Last February, Mellon wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "The military keeps encountering UFOs. Why doesn't the Pentagon care?" Another colleague, Jim Semivan, is a 25-year veteran of the CIA's National Clandestine Service, an undercover arm of the agency. Semivan retired from the CIA in 2007 and, like Elizondo and Mellon, joined the newly established To the Stars Academy last year. Quote, "My partner, Jim Semivan, is a spy," end quote, DeLong gushed on Twitter last November. Academy co-founder Hal Puthoff is another strange bedfellow. He's an electrical engineer who did controversial research for the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency on psychic abilities and working as a contractor for the Pentagon program. Ground control to Major Tom. In an interview with podcaster Joe Rogan a few weeks after his company launched last October, DeLong explained how his new venture was 2 years in the making, forged through clandestine meetings with an assortment of high-level national security and defense industry individuals. DeLong declined to be interviewed for this story. He, quote, "is not doing any press right now," end quote, said his spokesman. According to The Rocker, they disclosed various ET secrets to him, one being an alien body in government possession. DeLong, because of his celebrity platform and engagement with a younger demographic, was chosen to ease out the truth gradually and through fantasy sci-fi stories. "Why you?" interviewed Rogan. The Rogan who was the interview asked. "Because," DeLong replied, "disclosure has to be managed a certain way for people to understand." In addition to presenting himself as the designated UFO messenger for the U.S. government, DeLong discussed Atlantis, the lost ancient continent, now different alien races, how they were coming here for resource extraction, quote unquote, and how these aliens have genetically engineered humans periodically to goose humanity's evolution. DeLong has a gift for bringing talented people together, says Elizondo. Quote, he sees the puzzle and can put it together like few people can, end quote. But there are those in the UFO community who are skeptical of the rock star's motives. They believe he simply wants to profit off his fetish. He sells UFO-related books, websites, and merchandise, and that his antics are part of the business plan. There's certainly a large market for what DeLong is peddling. Pseudo-documentary shows on cable TV such as Ancient Aliens, now in its 13th season, and UFO Hunters have passionate audiences. Later this fall, the History Channel will run a new UFO dramatization series based on Project Blue Book, an actual top-secret Pentagon program in the 1950s and 60s that investigated UFO sightings and reports. The program's leader was a scientist who was a UFO skeptic before being persuaded that the topic should be taken seriously. Since the program was shut down in 1968, the U.S. government has consistently denied searching for UFOs until last year when Elizondo came out of the shadows. On the question of whether UFO encounters are genuine, Elizondo has asserted many times, including in his talk to the MUFON audience, that, quote, ultimately the data will speak for itself, end quote. As whether the data are, Elizondo responds with a variation of the hidden by the deep state argument. The Pentagon program, he says, commissioned large volumes of academic studies and data, but much of it is FOIA exempt, Freedom of Information Act exempt, he says, meaning that Freedom of Information Act requests yield little information. The day before the conference began, a Las Vegas TV show obtained a list of what it claims were several dozen of the studies, including one on invisibility cloaking and another on brain-machine interfaces. This argument contradicts Raid's assertion in a March interview with New York Magazine that, quote, we have hundreds of pages of paper that have been available since it was completed. Most of all, 80% at least, is public, end quote. It also contradicts what Mellon wrote last February in his Washington Post op-ed, which referred to a growing body of empirical data. Mellon's referring specifically to data from military radar detection of unidentified aerial phenomena and the cockpit video and audio recordings from naval fighter jet pilots who have supposedly encountered this phenomenon. In 2004, sightings was not the only time the military pilots saw Tic Tacs, says Mellon. Pilots spotted a similar UFO at least once a year. At least one other occasion, they described it falling down into the water and moving around just under the surface. In addition, says Mellon, quote, there are dozens of cases in the last few years, not involving Tic Tacs per se, but Navy personnel and warships. It is absolutely not a one-off event, end quote. Mellon finds a Tic Tac video compelling, but experts outside the believer circle do not. Quote, all such unusual sights can be explained by either natural or human-made phenomena, end quote, says Avi Loeb, chair of the Harvard Astronomy Department. In other words, the pilots could have been seeing optical illusions generated by their instruments, or the sun, or a bird, or clouds, or, as has happened before, experimental, classified aircraft being tested in the area. Last year, the CNN showed the Tic Tac video to Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astronomer and author. Quote, call me when you have a dinner invite from an alien, end quote. That's what he quipped. Skeptics also take aim at the conspiracy theory itself. When alien spaceships are so numerous, why don't the thousands of observation satellites in orbit, most aimed at Earth, pick them up? You can say the U.S. government is covering it up. But then every government is covering it up, not just ours. This is what Seth Shostak said, senior astronomer of the SETI Institute. Quote, I find that unbelievable, end quote. So if Elizondo wanted the Pentagon and others to take him seriously, why would he come to this fringe conference? And for that matter, why would he, Mellon, and their highly credentialed colleagues join forces with a rock star flake like DeLong? Elizondo has heard the whispers and read the conspiracy theories on Reddit. Quote, no, I am not running a government disinformation campaign, end quote. That's what he said in an exasperated tone. Quote, I think a huge risk in leaving a safe job to do this. If this doesn't pay, I'll be working at Walmart, he says. Well, don't look now, but we have foreign interest. The next 6 months or so will be pivotal to the success of To the Stars, Elizondo says. That's when he expects to be able to present more data on UFO sightings. As the Academy's head of global security and special programs, he serves as a liaison to the government, including Congress, the Pentagon, and the intelligence services. But there are still more questions than answers. Is he working behind the scenes to get some of the information that he knows from his Pentagon days declassified? He wouldn't say. When will the public have access to this information? Quote, that is being addressed, end quote. That's what he replied. Over the summer, the Senate Armed Services Committee asked at least one of the Super Hornet pilots to brief staff members about the Tic Tac incident. Quote, in the end, I'm not worried about credibility, end quote, Elizondo says. Quote, I'm worried about facts, end quote. Reminding that the only facts the public has are grainy videos, and he insisted there is data that's not out yet. Elizondo says UFO believers weren't the only ones at the MUFO conference. Quote, you ready for this? Ukrainians and the UN. Why would people from the UN and the Ukrainians, which we know are apparently tied to the Russians, be there? End quote. They signed up, he says, after they knew I was coming. Foreign intelligence. That means they're taking this seriously. Either they have a program or want to program, or they want to know if this is bullshit. Either way, don't look now, but we have foreign interest, end quote. Elizondo understood why many remained dubious. You can take things at face value. You can't take things at face value. I get it. I'm a career spy, he says. But in the end, as crazy as it sounds, this is real. It's by Sean Adeltabai of your Newswire.